Dr. Murphy.
All right, and I'm going to go, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for being patient as we do this. I'm Dr. Robin Murphy. I'm a professor here at Texas A&M, and I'm also Vice President of the Center for Robotic-Assisted Search and Rescue. And today what I want to do is go through the quantitative data analysis of our use of small unmanned aerial systems at Hurricane Harvey with on behalf of the Fort Bend County Office of Emergency Management. These flights were led by Justin Adams and also with David Merrick's team coming in to support, and the data analysis has been done primarily by Odier Fernandez, and we'd like to thank the National Science Foundation for their sponsorship. So let's just start off and go for, if you're not familiar, let's just look at the video of things that have been done at there, and I'm trying to play the video. I'm almost, no, the cursor's not letting me get there. I'll close. Okay, this is, there we go, finally got it.
Center for Robotic-Assisted Search and Rescue at Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station, working with Fort Bend County Office of Emergency Management to provide small unmanned systems. Aerial vehicles and marine vehicles, looking at the underneath bridges and rivers. What we've been doing is providing small unmanned aerial systems primarily via aerial imagery, so that they can like their signals and make real-time decisions. We believe this is the largest formal deployment by public officials of small unmanned aircraft systems for disaster response in our mission. These drone platforms work in different elevations, have provided a local emergency management team with aerial photography at multiple scales and in high resolution. We have the ability to adjust unmanned aircraft flights in real time to assist with search and rescue operations with these rescue. Teams with comprised of federal, state, and county organizations and agencies across the United States, all working together to help the citizens get their plans.
Okay, apparently you're not able to hear the video on this, but it's really nice voiceovers and in sound, but you get a sense of the, excuse me, the types of UAVs. So what I want to do in this talk is go over a portion of the quantitative data that we collected and analyzed. And I want to focus on the preparedness and response phases. So I think it's also important to know that we are not covering in this talk the equally important ethnographic data talking about crewing and airspace management, the things that are not as much from quantitative data. And so I'll first give a short overview. Then I'll try to answer the questions of what were the small unmanned aerial systems used for and what platforms were used and why, and then recommendations for hurricane and flood events. And I'm assuming you can hear me now.
Yes.
All right. Great. All right, so in terms of overview, Hurricane Harvey hit the Houston area, really started socking in with the rain the 27th and the 28th. Note that the first CRASAR flight for Fort Bend County was on the 26th, which was before. And we were deployed there from the 25th to the 4th. And that was the first when you start to see the evacuation orders being lifted. There were 112 flights or sorties for 56 mission objectives. It was really 111. We had one aborted flight. All flight crews consisted generally of a two-person pilot team and always a county representative was there with us. We had 10 pilots that served as the pilot in command. We had 3 other pilots who were either co-pilots or did not fly as pilot in command. We had 2 people that did nothing but data management. 9 models of robots were used, of UAS, 14 were available. And if you look at that list, you realize we had pretty much one of everything, as well as wonderful sensor packages, thermal, multispectral. It was really a choice of what we wanted to use for a particular mission. It wasn't, the choice wasn't because it was the only thing we had. We had lots of options. And I think that makes this an interesting data set. So in Fort Bend County's words, the ability to use these small unmanned aerial systems enabled the rescue operations to be conducted faster, more efficiently, safer. They were able to get ahead of the game on the damage and the debris assessment. They could look for the critical infrastructure and the flood load and with the different things with the bridges and the rivers in there. A big help was also explaining to the citizens about their neighborhoods were still flooded. And it's always nice when you can see the sewage and perhaps a dead deer floating in the image of why you shouldn't be wading through that to get back to your house. And then it also helped, again, to establish this broad county government and citizen support for the use of it, which was very, very widespread, very positive. We also, Fort Bend, nominated CRASAR, and we were given an award from the Emergency Managers Association of Texas. But why should you care, right? Wonderful that we flew, wonderful that Fort Bend's happy, wonderful we won an award. What's important, I think the data is very useful for first responders. It was at that time, it was a record-setting number of flights. It was outweighed by the 247 flights that were flown at Irma by Florida State's team, David Merrick's team, of which CRASAR was part of. The flights occurred before, during, and after, through all the phases, the classic phases of a disaster. So it provides a longitudinal study. Fort Bend was knowledgeable about small UAS. They owned drones. They had used drones in 2 prior floods. They had thought about the manpower. They already had a drone policy in place. And like I said before, we had an access to a wide variety of assets to that. And also what's interesting is all the requests for air sources went through formal channels. So it's going back to that idea of the conference in Miami, how do you do that? So this was already worked out. So anything that we're showing here was the positive results were by design, not by luck or accident. It was the actual thought had been put into that. And I think that makes it very important and interesting to think about and what that means for new missions or new applications. So where were they used? What were they used for? Well, we have an online class called Small Unmanned Aerial Systems for Emergency Managers, and we go over the 7 general mission types that have appeared that we've been able to document in the use of small unmanned aerial systems around the world since 2005. And they really come down into 7 basic types. And each of these types have a different flying style, a different set of data products, different post-processing, different set of expectations. There's the classic, we need to just see what's going on, strategic awareness, general reconnaissance, general surveys, detailed inspection or structural inspection, searching on the ground for a missing person, similar with a water search or a marine mass casualty event. Debris, damage, flood estimation, again, a much more specialized type of survey. And then tactical situation awareness, like looking to see what roads are open, can you get around, overwatch type things, and delivery. Of the 7, 4 of those mission types were seen at Hurricane Harvey. And here they are with specific objectives under that. So for debris, damage, flood estimation, you had classic need to mat. You had a lot more actually on visual assessment where experts were looking to see the state very quickly assess. And also there were tornadoes. A line of tornadoes came through on top of that. Inspection, you see looking at bridges, you look at buildings, and also their levees and our dams, not dam. Strategic recon and survey, public information. The county judge used the UAVs in his twice-a-day reports to the county to explain to the citizens why the evacuation orders were still in place or what the state was, and everybody got to see what the Barker's Reservoir was doing. So it was very useful for that. And then tactical situation awareness, overwatch for the teams that were going into neighborhoods to prepare to help rescue people, and also for route or transportation so you can help get the responders to the right locations, to the right place. Now, what's interesting to me about these 4 missions is that look how many of those objectives required real-time expertise. What in the scientific literature over in the academic side of the world we call the mission specialists and just experts. Okay, when you're doing visual assessment, it isn't something that I, as a regular pilot, can do. It's something that requires someone who knows what they're looking for specifically, the landmark, what that map is, what was it look like before. Same thing with the inspection, the bridge and building inspection. This isn't just somebody off the street doing it. And the same with route or transportation surveys, so tactical, you're looking for a purpose. You want to know certain things about it, not just hope that we flew over and got the right information. And that's going to come back again. We're going to see that again and again. The missions by day, let's look at those missions by day. So you see that we've got colors, the debris, damage, flood estimation. No surprise, you're getting what the before state is looking at as well as during and after. And then you see it start moving from debris to inspection, a little bit of tactical and a little bit of strategic, but toward the end. And notice that you started having the evacuation orders go out on the 26th, and they started to be released about the 1st, the 2nd, and there begin to gradually be there. Now, you see a big gap right there around the incident and the initial part of the response, and that was the weather. It's hard to fly when it's raining and when the clouds are still very, very low and overcast. Clearly, that would have been valuable. Notice also that these missions for the first 7 days are primarily ones that needed real-time expertise. As you move on in time, as you got into September, then you're starting to see things that back office experts needed to look at, things, the mapping missions start, just showing general pictures rather than taking the video and the pictures you already had and pushing those forward. And I think one conclusion to draw from here is this idea that, with UAVs, you just throw them up, we just need situation awareness is a myth. Is that indeed every time those platforms were going up in the air, there was a good reason for it. There was that. And only the public information missions were general. The rest were very, very focused. So let's look at what platforms were used. Well, first off, here are the assets that were brought by this at the time we were part of Texas A&M through our Buses Without Borders program. We have the majority were the small, they were all small unmanned aerial systems, but the smaller ones that fly typically at the 400 AGL or less. And then we had the in situ scan eagle as well, and that gives it different viewpoints. So I've grayed out the images of the ones that we didn't actually use. Well, the number one platform was the little DJI Mavic Pro. It was used in 78 of the sorties and for every mission type and every data product, from images, video, to map making. So that was the all around, for $1,000, there you go. With all of those really big expensive ones, small expensive, all that, that's what you had. Now let's look at the sorties by mission type. Let's see what we see that was mostly Mavics were the ones of choice. Everyone liked, we'll just go back to talk about the Mavic just a little bit, inexpensive, easy to charge the batteries with your car, off the inverter in a car. Just really, you didn't have to, if you lost it, you only lost $1,000. You start flying something like an M600 or some of these and Inspire, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars if you crash, or if it flies away, or if it's wet, or something happens. So really nice to know that you can do something with $1,000. All right, the sorties by mission type. The number one number of flights went for inspection. You see with levee or dam, and those were when we were doing mapping missions, right? So those are going to get a lot of flights and a lot of images there. But bridge inspection, there was a lot of times that was, they wanted bridge inspection to go out and see what the state is of the river with all the transportation going into this suburban county. Debris damage flood estimation, no surprise, that was an important one, and particularly visual assessment, being able to look at the flood and inundation maps, mentally checking to see it, and also forensically, why is this area backing up? What's going on here? Is there something that we can do to fix? And also mapping there as well. Tornado impact missions, and then we see a little bit of strategic and then a little bit of tactical. What is interesting to me is that rotorcraft were used exclusively for the response phase. Actually, for the before incident and response phase, it was all rotorcraft. Fixed wings didn't start to get used until September 2nd, even though they were available. And that gets back to this as well, is that everything was being flown in first-person view. Even though we could do pre-programmed flights, even though we could have given waypoints, even though we could have done the mapping and all that, all of these devices were capable of it. Certainly the Mavic is too, but it was all about the experts trying to see the decisions in real time. Okay, so it wasn't really about mapping initially during the response. We were getting a lot of short flights due to the I'll know it when I see it, very purposeful perception. And this is classic from cognitive engineering decision making as well. And also the operations tempo is so intense and the travel times were so long that the attitude of, oh, while you're there, go ahead and take another 20 minutes and get an orthomosaic while you're there just wasn't time effective. There's an advantage as well to having rotorcraft when you're doing a flood in the water, because you can hover and watch the video and estimate the flow rates by that. You know, it's kind of the debris going by. That's a lot, that's a little, and of course, if you're a drainage expert, you mentally can translate that into real volume. Orthomosaics are wonderful, but if you're trying to share them with people, you're trying to email them, you're trying to upload them, you're trying to transfer them, you're trying to we've seen that since the flooding, since 2015, through the various floods we've been in. It's just very hard to deal with. So you don't really, and nobody wants to look at them. They're looking, they don't need the big master image as much as they need actionable decision until a little bit later in the game. Rotorcraft also have the advantage of the landing zones. It's, you know, when you're thinking, it's like, oh, well, we'll be able to go to the local soccer field or the baseball field and launch a fixed wing and have it come back. And it turns out all of those wonderful open space areas tend to be in the floodplains and underwater. That kind of interferes with the ability. So, and it was often hard to find a place to launch the rotorcraft. And also keep in mind, we were generally under 200 feet AGL. Now again, about the op tempo, let's push a little bit on that a little bit more and talk about that. If you look at the first person view sorties, the average time was about 9 minutes per sortie and about 14 minutes per mission. We're doing about 1.2 sorties for mission with the rotorcraft in that first person view. Now the number is probably low. We have known plus estimated. We did not consistently record flight times, and so the estimation is the means the timestamp of the first and last data product. So that's going to be off by 2 to 3 minutes for the takeoff and landing. But it's still, you're still talking about sortie times, durations of being 12 minutes. We're not seeing this needs to be in the air for 35 minutes or needs to stay on station for an hour and a half. It's nope, we're up, we're looking, there we go, got it, next one, you know, kind of op tempo. Another thing to look at is that one thing that by looking at what the data was actually captured, when the experts are saying, yeah, get a picture of that, get a picture, video, can we get video? Yeah, there, no, there, get a picture of that, starts to also give insight into what the experts are looking at. So they are looking at or recording only 75% of the sortie. And that argues again that They don't need to be flying. The choice of not using Fort Bend County's experts. These are people who had who knew how to fly, but they needed to be doing other things. They didn't have to do the batteries recharge, do any maintenance. They didn't have to take off and land. They could just go over, look at, there, go, and then start calling back any decisions or things they wanted to do. So this reinforces this idea that trying to double up on your experts being your pilots may not be the best use of manpower, of their expertise, particularly in the early times. It also continues to reinforce what we've seen time and time again, is that we need to have a suite of tools that help these experts annotate, snippet, prioritize, transmit, and get the critical data, rather than saying, oh, look, we've put to Facebook 20-minute flight or a 12-minute flight. Go find in this data what you need to find. Good luck with that. So we need to have more of that type of data to decision tools. Another thing about the ops tempo is that the missions were in a 20-mile radius. It's literally a 19.95 radius around the Office of Emergency Management. It took anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to reach some of these locations, and it was extremely helpful to have an expert because they often knew the area and knew that you could cut across somebody's yard and get up to here to actually get to some place where you could fly. So that was great. But think about that in terms of wireless streaming. Now, we didn't have problems with wireless. Most of the cell infrastructure was intact for Fort Bend. That certainly wasn't true in Irma. But now as you start looking at that, this is, if you're talking about, oh, we're going to have streaming, well, this is what your wireless network has got to support, that kind of coverage. And we do a lot of work with the FirstNet providers and emergency things here at Texas A&M through the Internet Technology Center, Evaluation Center, and we're not seeing groups think about these large distances they have to cover. Another thing to look at, as some of the conclusions is what are these data products? Okay, where they wanted to do rapid decision making, they liked hover, they liked video, orthomosaics are big. So what were they doing? So if you looked at the data products for the experts, looking at whether they took pictures, whether they mostly collected videos, and looking at by mission and phases, this is a really hard one to read. You can see there's a lot of data that's being captured. The conclusion is that you're seeing primarily pictures for before, which kind of makes sense. You're getting kind of that still image of what everything was before the hurricane hit. Pictures and video for the response. Video to get that nice, it's a natural viewpoint of what's going on. But pictures are easy to ship and share and everybody point at the same picture. So that kind of made sense. And then mapping for recovery. You already know the state of everything. You're now trying to get these master images and work over these longer distances. So that's how it looked like it was shaping up. One lesson learned here, though, is unlikely to say that, oh, look, now that we've got all this data, we'll just give it to that person over in the GIS branch or the GIS manager. They're not going to be able to absorb the extra work. You've already got, just for art, we were at about 150 gigabytes of data total. The Mavics produced almost 90 gigabytes of data. We had to have a dedicated data manager to handle the backups, the renaming, because everything comes with image 001 in the same file folder. So, we've got 6 teams in the field and multiple missions. Somebody's got to make sure that gets squared away. The annotating, alerting another group within another ESF that something's in here for them to look at. The editing, the snippeting. If you're doing mapping, somebody needs to be in charge of uploading and make sure the upload didn't stall out, or how come that my map hasn't come back? Could you, alert me? It starts really adding up. And it wasn't like the GIS people were looking for things to do, sitting around. I mean, I've been in disasters since 2001, and those people are always busy. So, trying to expect more out of them is unrealistic. So we need to keep that in mind for the data suggests that the data handling is going to have impacts on manpower. So based on this data analysis, here's some recommendations for hurricane and flood events, for the upcoming season. The primary one is to focus on first-person view and experts. So this idea of manual flying, enabling them to see what they need to see at a distance, not to think about the UAVs as a reduction in manpower or substitution, that you'll just send the UAVs and now that's going to, it's an amplifier and accelerator, but they're going to have to be involved. So you have the expert with the team, but don't expect to save any manpower because they're going to be the pilot, because they're going to need to take that information, go off and do something else immediately with it. Their best use of their time is not changing out batteries or dealing with stuff. Good luck with streaming. There's a Murphy's Law. Streaming works for Justin, never works for me. And if you start looking at what your capacity is when you have multiple teams covering a 20-mile radius, I think there's some there. So my suggestion is to practice that pilot-expert coordination, and also to be clear on what data you're trying to collect for what mission objective, rather than I see so many classes that are all about, oh, you're a first responder, the first thing you need to know is how to do mapping. It's like, well, that's actually probably the last thing you need to know. It's important. I'm not saying mapping isn't important, or is that. But in terms of what going out to the field, if you only did that, you would probably make if you only did the first person view, the manual flying with the experts, you'd probably make a very big difference, positive difference. So some other recommendations, 3 other ones, is the Mavic. Look, invest in the inexpensive Rotorcraft platforms. It's wonderful that we have these amazing platforms that can carry these super high resolution cameras and these thermal images cameras. I love all of those, but they're not, they're icing on the cake. They're not, you can do it for $1,000. You don't have to buy these. And I think that means it's more affordable and more treatable. Have a dedicated data manager and a data management plan, including how are you going to maintain chain of custody, how are you doing your backup and archiving, how will you ever find your data again, which is why I just love that timeline from Hanger. And then just go ahead and expect to work within visual line of sight in the 200-foot AGL limits. We saw that because of safety. Even though we could have flown at different things, there's the density of air traffic was such that you wanted to keep it in visual line of sight rather than going extended beyond visual line of sight. And also just everybody keeping clear on what their regulations and their requirements were. So just think about in those terms. And I'd like to just also summarize and point out that most of this was actually not unknown. I mean, we've been flying for disaster since 2005 from Hurricane Katrina. We were the first to use small fixed wing and rotorcraft for disasters. We've been in 13 deployments. And it turns out nothing was really a big surprise. So there was nothing that was different from Katrina or even Fukushima Daiichi there. So I think the take home also is that there is a corpus of data from 12 years of flying from across the world. And now the unmanned aerial system culture should move beyond thinking of these as isolated sort of war stories. Oh yeah, I did this, they did that. And now let's look at data collection and doing more evidence-based analysis training, and then acquisition of assets that are based on evidence, based on the data. And our Harvey data set that we derived all this data from is now available at this website. And we'd be delighted to, of course, sharing all the data we can, any insights, any questions, lessons to be learned, please let us know. So thank you, and I'll exit this and go to questions if we have time.
Anybody have any questions?